俺さ、お前はもっとひどい殺し方しようと思ってるんだよ。どんな方法がいいかな。爪を一枚一枚剥いで、指も全部切り取って、体中の穴という穴に突っ込んで、でも殺さないで、気が狂うまで、死ぬまで犯すっていうのとかさ、そういうの、本当は好きだろ。
Disgust surged through him, and he gripped the hilt of his knife. He knew that he was playing right into Keisuke's hands. He knew, and yet...
Akira! 早くこっちに来いよ!
With a fierce roar, Keisuke charged. His knife slashed toward Akira's neck, cleaving sheets of rain as it came. With not a moment to spare, Akira jumped back, then whipped his own knife out of its sheath, and held it at the ready. An attempt to parry numbed his arms to the bone. Sensing that he risked losing his weapon, he withdrew the foot he had used to launch and turn his body away from Keisuke's strike. Actually, crossing blades left him shocked by the increase in Keisuke's abilities. His speed had reached a whole new level.
どうしたよ。殺すぞ。
Keisuke's hold was thick with joy. It came in hard, striking from every angle. Unable to detect any gaps in his attacks, Akira was forced to remain on the defensive. Keisuke had a better build than him, now that he was also Akira's equal, or faster, in terms of speed. It was a struggle, just to hold him off. The rain was like needles against Akira's skin.
Akira!
Unable to brace himself on the wet ground, he slipped and almost lost his foot. Keisuke's blade passed scant centimeters from his nose, and a spray of rain caught him in the face. The shockwave left in heavy blows, which stung the surface of his skin.
お前をこの手で殺す日を待ってたよ。楽しくてしょうがないよ。
The attacks kept coming, one after another. He showed no sign of flagging. Akira raised his knife with both hands to block Keisuke's failing slash. The impact tore through his body like an electric shock. Keisuke snarled past their gritting blades.
もっともっとかかってこいよ。本気で俺を憎んで殺そうとしてみろよ。俺は
His arm shook as he pressed back against Keisuke's strength. He cried out with all the force he could muster, squeezing his voice through gritted teeth.
お前と戦うつもりはない。
Rage twisted Keisuke's features.
なめてんじゃねえぞ。
With a roar, Keisuke thrust his knife forward, aiming a heavy blow at Akira's gut. This time, Rage made his attack wild. Akira instantly saw his plan and matched the flow of his movements to deflect his blade to one side. The force of it staggered Akira too, but he didn't miss his chance to seize Keisuke's shoulder and wrist. He applied leverage, locking the joints and dragged Keisuke to the ground. Keisuke landed hard on his back. The impact drove the air from his lungs. He bucked, fighting to tear his wrist free. Realizing that he couldn't hang on like this, Akira quickly straddled Keisuke's torso. With his right knee, he pinned Keisuke's left shoulder, while his left hand fought to control Keisuke's knife. When Keisuke tried to get up, he grabbed Keisuke's head with his right hand and forced it to the ground. Keisuke glared at him, eyes blazing with fury. Akira was panting, his heart beating out a fast, lunatic rhythm. Against Keisuke's beastly strength, it was all Akira could do to keep his knife at bay. His face contorted with rage. Keisuke tried to bite the arm pressing his head against the ground. It was like fighting a wild animal. He acted quickly to avoid Keisuke's teeth, but Keisuke, blinded by anger, refused to give up. That was when he remembered what Arbitro had told him. His blood neutralized Rin, and had a chance of killing the subject in the process. He felt his heart skip a beat. But his plea fell on deaf ears. Keisuke was fighting like mad to break free. If Akira focused on avoiding his teeth, he risked losing his grip on Keisuke's knife hand. The rain beat down without mercy. He didn't think he could last much longer. As Keisuke threw himself from side to side, Akira's fingers finally slipped off his wrist. Scorching heat blossomed on Akira's palm. The blade had broken his skin. Red droplets fell from the wound to land on Keisuke's cheek. 2 drops. 3. They mingled with the rain, which washed them inexorably toward. Keisuke, who had been scowling suspiciously at the change in Akira's demeanor, suddenly went rigid. He flung Akira off him with unbelievable strength. Convulsions racked his body, spraying Akira with water from the ground. Akira felt strangely detached, as though he were watching from a great distance. Keisuke's scream pulled him back to reality. It felt like a knife ripping through his soul. His vision tunneled, as though He were experiencing vertigo. He could barely make out what was happening. He didn't know how much time had passed. At some point, the sounds of agony had ceased. Now, there was only the drumming of the rain. Had he failed? Was this how it would end? Little by little, clarity was returning to his thoughts. He turned to look at what he'd done. Keisuke was lying motionless, hands still clutching his chest. You killed him. Akira's heart thundered in his ears. He drank a deep breath and exhaled slowly. He still didn't know for sure. Taking another deep breath to prepare himself, he touched the side of Keisuke's neck. The surface of Keisuke's skin was as cold as could be, and he jerked his hand back without thinking. It was the rain. It had to be. Repeating this to himself like mantra, he reached again, fingers searching desperately for... There. It was feeble, but he could feel a pulse. All the tension drained from his body. He nearly collapsed on the spot. Keisuke was alive. Relief and deeper, stronger emotions rose like a crashing wave, but he forced himself to stay focused. Keisuke's life could still be in danger. At the very least, he needed to get out of the rain. Akira took Keisuke's arm, draped it over his shoulder, and stood. He had to brace his feet to keep from staggering. Keisuke's unconscious body was heavier than he had expected, and his clothes were weighed down with water. He made a heavy burden for Akira, who had already spent his strength. Despite that, he took a deliberate step forward. Keep moving, he told himself. It doesn't matter where you go, as long as you can rest. The rain was still pounding when they reached a small building. Akira held Keisuke up, dragging him in through the wide open double doors. The short hallway was strewn with tiles fallen from the walls. There was a door where it ended and a set of stairs leading to the second floor close by the entrance. While still on its hinges, the door had become too warped to close all the way. He wedged his toe into the small gap and forced it fully open. The room beyond was dim, smelling of dust and mold, but emptier than he expected. It didn't look as if the room had contained much to begin with. The bleak, grey color of the walls was not the fault of time or neglect. Driving rain stolen through the broken windows, and the fabric still clinging to the curtain railing was dripping wet. There was another door at the back, but he lacked the energy to see what was inside. Nudging some broken glass and wood fragments off to one side, he lowered Keisuke to the floor. His wet clothes would gather dust and dirt, but that was the least of Kira's concerns. Keisuke was still unconscious. His bangs clung to his forehead, and his complexion was deadly pale. Feeling a surge of alarm, Akira pressed his fingers to the side of Keisuke's neck. It was a relief to feel the pulse under his fingertips. But Keisuke was still cold. That needed to change. Running a hand through his own dripping bangs, Akira sat down beside Keisuke and let out a breath. Though the room was a big improvement over the street, it was still a far cry from warm. If he at least had a way to wipe Keisuke dry. At the hotel, he could trade for blankets and towels. It wasn't far from here. He started to get up, but realized that his knees were shaking. He too was at his limit. His body felt like a block of lead. He wanted to lie down and sleep for days. But he couldn't let himself rest. Not yet. Forcing himself to focus, he climbed to his feet and scanned the room for anything that could hold the rain at bay. There, a pile of wooden boards that may have once been a set of shelves. He picked one up. It was just the right size and the thickness. Blankets and towels would be useless if he couldn't keep them dry. He ran into the rain toward the hotel. The crowd who flocked to the hotel after the club was destroyed must have reached a more manageable level, as the trading post had replenished its stock of solids. By the time he finished trading for a blanket, towel, water, and food, the rain had grown somewhat lighter. He hurried back to find Keisuke still lying on the floor, his blue coveralls dark with moisture. He hadn't moved an inch. Crouching beside him, Akira reassured himself by checking his pulse. This relief was short-lived, however, as the icy temperature of his skin was cause for alarm. He quickly dried Keisuke's hair with a towel and started on his face, but didn't get far before he had to stop and stare. Cracked, purplish lips, sunken cheeks, skin so pale he could see the fins beneath the surface. Akira's chest tightened. He didn't look alive. He will have to remove his soaked clothes to dry them. When he put his hands to Keisuke's coveralls, Keisuke let out a small groan. His eyelids twitched, his brow furrowed, and he gradually opened his eyes.
Keisuke.
His dull gaze settled on Akira, reacting to his hoarse whisper.
Akira.
Was the rain gone from his system? He felt a moment of hope, but as Keisuke began to focus, his eyes went wide, filling with a black hatred. Keisuke's attempt to leap to his feet ended with him curled into a shivering ball. A moan of unbearable agony squeezed past his lips.
Oi.
Akira reached out to steady him, and in answer, Keisuke roared. Snarling like an animal, he swung a fist at Akira.
やめろうるさい
Moving away from trashing Keisuke, Akira tore down the exposed curtain and ripped it in two. He grabbed Keisuke's hands and bound them tight.
やめろ座るな
The pain must have been considerable, as he had weakened to the point where Akira could control him. Next, Akira restrained his feet in the same manner.
離せ離せ
Abruptly, Keisuke stopped struggling, his face crumpled and the rage falling away. Instead of burning with hatred, his eyes were suddenly pleading.
ケイスケくれよ体が痛いんだよ痛いんだよ
withdrawal symptoms, but Akira's blood was supposed to be neutralizing the rain. He'd assumed Keisuke's pain was part of the allergic reaction. Could it be both?
頼むからライン
He was playing with someone he hated. Akira couldn't begin to imagine how great his suffering must be. He felt like he was being ripped apart. It was his words that had driven Keisuke to ring, but the emotion, not anger, though it burned just as hot, that his knowledge engendered in him had no place to expand its fury. He saw no way to punish himself, not yet, so he lowered his eyes and waited for the storm to pass. In the darkness, he recalled what he knew about withdrawal. He heard it was like being torn limb from limb. Victims experience terrible chills and an agony that reached bone deep. Many fell into a state of delirium, and some never recovered. Fear of this fate drove people to keep using even when they wanted to stop. For Keisuke, it was even worse, with symptoms of withdrawal, compounded by his response to Akira's blood. When it came to breaking addiction's curse, it seemed there was no way to avoid pain. After wailing and thrashing for some time, Keisuke fell into a deep, death-like sleep. Akira gazed at his gaunt, pale face. The fit must have worn him out. He turned to the window. It was probably passed down by now, but he couldn't say for sure, thanks to the rain clouds covering the sky. After giving up on removing Keisuke's wet clothes, he covered him with a blanket anyway, thinking it would be better than nothing. He wiped Keisuke's wet, plastered forehead with a towel. If he could just survive the worst of the symptoms, he might be able to recover. In the meantime, Akira felt duty bound to stay with him through his suffering. He sprang awake at a sort of scream. He must have dozed off while listening to the rain. He looked over to see Keisuke moaning and trembling.
骨がきしむ。痛い。
His voice was gravelly from screaming. His body shook like a leaf in the wind. He was weeping, sobbing.
ケイスケ。それだ
Akira tried to rub him on the back, but Keisuke knocked his hand away. Then, all of a sudden, his rage turned to pleading.
Akira!
His bloodshot eyes filled with tears.
頼むよ。助けてよ。痛いんだ。死にそうなんだよ。お願い。頼むから。ラインを。アキラ
The desperation in Keisuke's voice made Akira fear that his heart would burst. Crushing the urge to turn away, he cupped Keisuke's face with both hands and looked straight at him.
ダメだ。耐えろ。くれよ、ライン。アキラ耐えてくれ。
His voice was quivering. It felt as if he were the one being torn to pieces. Keisuke's face was a mass of sweat and tears, snot and a drool. Chills and convulsions made his teeth clatter loudly. His eyes saw nothing but rain.
だったら、殺してくれよ、もう。死ぬからいいよ。こんなの嫌だよ。苦しい。痛いんだ。助けて。アキラ。
Akira felt like he was going crazy. Please. For the first time in his life, he prayed. Please, if anyone's out there, save him. The rain still hadn't stopped. He had a feeling that it was close to midnight. He sat down heavily, resting his exhausted body against the wall, and watched Keisuke, who had fallen asleep again, with bleary eyes. His head felt stuffed with cotton, but he couldn't bring himself to rest. There was no telling when Keisuke might have another fit. Amid the pervasive smell of mold and dust, a thick, sour stench hung in the air. Keisuke had vomited a little while ago. His stomach had been empty, but he managed to expel a frightening quantity of bile. His face now was as peaceful as that of a corpse, and his eyes looked sunken. Akira wondered if there would ever be an end to this battle. There was a strange tightness in his left hand. He looked down and was mildly surprised to see a red streak running diagonally across palm. He had completely forgotten about the cut. The wound was mostly dry, and he felt no pain. Sensing Keisuke's stare, he looked up. Another attack might be on its way. No matter what happened, Akira was determined to stay by his side. Keisuke moaned. A shudder ran through his body. Akira knelt beside him and supported his shoulders. His forehead was soaked with sweat. It appeared as if his symptoms were less severe. His eyes cracked open and fixed on Akira's face. He still had the clouded look of rain. But at the same time, the hatred in terms seemed to be fading. Instead, a chaotic swirl of emotion smoldered in their depths.
もう少し耐えてくれ。アキラ、助けてくれよ。アキラ。
A bitter taste filled his mouth.
アキラ、頼むから。
Keisuke's trembling hand reached for Akira's cheek. He looked up, struggling to breathe, eyes damp. And then,
ごめん。
Keisuke murmured, his voice hollow and small, then lowered his eyelids. He had gone back to sleep. Akira brushed his bangs, sticky with sweat, away from his forehead. A lump of emotion surged up from his chest and pressed against the backs of his eyes. He let out a deep breath as he waited for it to pass. If this didn't end soon, guilt and fear would crush him. He couldn't see anything. He couldn't hear anything. Alone, Keisuke stumbled through a fathomless darkness, his outstretched hands leading the way. While he couldn't make out any shapes, it felt as if some patches of darkness were thinner than others. He was wandering now through one such patch. The space in front of him was faintly gray. like a mist clearing with the first rays of dawn. His feet seemed to grow heavier with each step he took toward the brighter region, but something told him that he had to keep moving. He dragged himself slowly, tortuously, onward. The darkness was clearing. Just a little further. Without warning, the weight on his feet increased. He could not take another step. Something was pulling him back. He looked down, and what he saw turned his blood to ice. A dead man was clinging to his ankles. Blue hair, a worn leather jacket. His eyes stared at Keisuke, unblinking. His face was a crimson ruin. Seized by terror, Keisuke tried to wrench himself away, but the man would not let go. Instead, his fingers dug in deeper. They bit into Keisuke's ankles with a creaking of bone. Through the ruin of his face, the man seemed to grin. The next instant, arms burst from the darkness. They seized his body with blood-drenched hands, leaving no part of him unbound. Icy fingers dug into his flesh. The pain was exquisite, and nothing compared to the terror. He screamed. This was a soundless world. Not even he could hear his screams. And still, he kept screaming.
Keisuke!